The conference room on the 48th floor smelled like expensive tobacco and old blood. Kang Ji-hoon sat at the head of the glass table, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, watching three rival bosses argue over territory in Gangnam, like dogs fighting over scraps. His suit was black, his tie silver, his expression carved from ice. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "You'll take what I give you," he said quietly, "or you'll take nothing at all." The room fell silent. One of the bosses, a thick-necked man named Park, opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Ji-hoon's eyes stopped him cold. Everyone in Seoul's underworld knew the same truth. Kang Ji-hoon didn't make threats. He made prophecies. The door at the far end of the room opened. Ji-hoon's security chief stepped in, his face unusually pale. Behind him, moving slowly with the aid of a wooden cane, came an elderly black woman. She wore a simple floral dress and comfortable shoes. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes, dark and sharp, swept the room with the calm of someone who had seen worse things than this. Ji-hoon's entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the marble floor, with a screech that made everyone flinch. Then before anyone could process what was happening, Ji-hoon's knees hit the marble floor with a crack that echoed through the silent room. His forehead touched the ground. "Halmione," he whispered, "you came." The three rival bosses stared. Park's mouth hung open. The security chief looked like he might pass out. The elderly woman simply smiled, in a knowing expression that held decades of secrets, and said in English, "Hello, Ji-hoon. It's been a long time." Before we get into why the most feared man in Seoul just bowed to a grandmother he hasn't seen in 50 years, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get wild, and I need to know you're riding with me till the end. Also, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and honestly, it makes my day when I see your locations pop up. All right, now let's get back to Grace, because her whole world's about to flip upside down, and she has no idea what's coming. Grace Robert had been working as a maid in the executive building for 6 months and had never once seen the 48th floor. She cleaned offices on floors 20 through 35, invisible to the men in expensive suits who passed her without a glance. She sent half her paycheck home to Detroit every month, saved the rest, and tried not to think too hard about what kind of business required armed guards in the elevators. Her phone buzzed while she was scrubbing a conference room on the 23rd floor. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Grace?" The voice was her mother's, tight with panic. "Baby, you need to get upstairs right now. Your grandmother's in the building." Grace's hand froze on the spray bottle. "What? Grandma's in Detroit. She can't even. She flew to Seoul. She's upstairs. She didn't tell anyone. Grace?" She went straight to the top floor, and she's asking for someone named Kang. The elevator to the 48th floor required a key card Grace didn't have. She convinced a confused security guard to take her up, insisting it was a family emergency. When the doors opened, she stepped into chaos. Men in suits were shouting in Korean. Someone was on a phone, voice urgent. And through the crowd, Grace saw her. Grandma Lorraine sat in a leather chair like it was her front porch, calm as Sunday morning. Kang Ji-hoon knelt beside her, not touching, but close enough that his posture screamed reverence. When he saw Grace approaching, he stood slowly, and for the first time since she'd started working there, he looked directly at her. "You're Grace Robert," he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, too confused to speak. "Your grandmother saved my life," Ji-hoon said. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. 50 years ago, I owe her a debt that can never be repaid." Lorraine chuckled, a dry sound. "Oh, it can be repaid, boy. That's why I'm here." Over the next hour, Grace learned a story that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her family. In 1952, during the Korean War, Lorraine had been a young nurse with a medical unit near Busan. She'd found a 12-year-old boy half dead in a ditch, shot by soldiers who thought he was carrying information. She'd hidden him, nursed him back to health, and when he was strong enough to run, she'd made him promise something. A blood oath, witnessed under the moon, in the tradition his own mother had taught him. "You promised," Lorraine said now, her voice still strong despite her age, "that if I or my blood ever needed you, you would answer. No questions, no conditions." Ji-hoon bowed his head. "I remember." "Good," Lorraine said, "because my granddaughter needs protection, and you're going to give it to her." Grace's stomach dropped. Grandma, what are you talking about? I don't need... There's a man in Detroit, Lorraine said, her eyes hard. Marcus Webb. He thinks you owe him something. He thinks because he helped you get this job, you belong to him. He's been calling me, threatening me, saying he's coming to Seoul to bring you home. Grace felt her throat tighten. Marcus. She'd left Detroit to escape him, a man who'd inserted himself into her life with favors and kindness, until she'd realized too late that he saw her as property. She'd thought an ocean would be enough distance. Jihoon's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him. This man has threatened you. He's not just threatening, Lorraine said. He's already here, in Seoul. He landed yesterday. The room tilted. Grace grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. How do you know that? Because he called me from the airport, baby, to tell me he's going to find you and make you understand that you don't walk away from him. Jihoon turned to his security chief, who still hovered near the door. He spoke 3 words in Korean, sharp and final. The security chief bowed and disappeared. Then Jihoon looked at Grace, really looked at her, and she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not pity, respect. You'll stay in my building, he said. Top floor, 24-hour security. He won't get near you. I can't, Grace started. I can't just... The debt is to your blood, Jihoon said. Your grandmother invoked it. You have no choice. Neither do I. Lorraine stood, leaning on her cane, and fixed Jihoon with a look that was part fondness, part warning. You've built yourself an empire on fear, boy. But fear only works until someone isn't afraid of you. Remember that. Jihoon bowed again, deep and formal. I remember everything you taught me, Halmione. By nightfall, Grace was installed in a penthouse suite that probably cost more per night than she made in 6 months. Her few belongings had been retrieved from her tiny studio apartment. 2 guards stood outside her door. She sat on the edge of a bed that felt like a cloud and tried to process that her grandmother had traveled 8,000 miles to cash in a 50-year-old blood debt from a Korean Mafia boss. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. Against her better judgment, she answered. Grace! Marcus's voice was smooth, warm, the voice that had once made her feel safe. I know you're in that building. I know you think you're protected. But baby, you don't understand. I didn't come all this way to leave without you. Her hands shook. Leave me alone, Marcus. I gave you everything. The job, the opportunity. I set this all up for you. You owe me. I don't owe you anything. His laugh was soft, almost sad. We'll see. Tell your new friend that protection only works if he never sleeps. Tell him I'm patient. I'll wait. The line went dead. Grace sat in the dark, her heart hammering, and wondered what kind of protection could stop a man who thought love was ownership. The next morning, Jihoon summoned her to his office. She'd expected corporate coldness, glass and steel and intimidation. Instead, she found a space that was almost warm. Wooden floors, bookshelves, a window overlooking the entire city. Jihoon stood at that window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. Marcus Webb, he said without turning, works for a private security firm in Detroit, former military, dishonorable discharge for conduct violations. He has connections to trafficking networks operating between the U.S. and Southeast Asia. He used his company's Seoul connections to track you here. Grace's blood ran cold. Trafficking? He's done this before. 3 women in the past 5 years. They all disappeared after rejecting him. 2 were eventually found. 1 wasn't. She felt sick. I didn't know. I just thought he was obsessive, Jihoon finished. He turned to face her. Dangerous men rarely announce what they are. They show you the mask until it's too late to run. And you? Grace heard herself say. What mask are you wearing? Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, almost amusement. I don't wear masks. Everyone knows what I am. A criminal. A businessman who operates outside the law when the law is insufficient. There's a difference. Not to the people you hurt. Jihoon studied her for a long moment. Your grandmother told me you were smart. She didn't mention you were brave enough to challenge me in my own office. She probably didn't think I'd be stupid enough. Now he did smile. Barely, just a curve at the corner of his mouth. I'm beginning to understand why she traveled so far to protect you. You have her spine. A knock at the door interrupted them. The security chief entered, spoke rapidly in Korean. Jihoon's expression hardened. He replied in the same language, curt and final, then looked at Grace. Marcus Webb was seen outside the building this morning. He's watching the exits. He has at least 2 men with him, possibly more. He's not hiding. He wants you to know he's there. Grace's hands curled into fists. Then I'll call the police. And tell them what? That your ex-boyfriend is standing on a public street? They'll do nothing. By the time he breaks a law they can prosecute, it will be too late. So what do I do? Hide forever. Jihoon walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a file. He slid it across to her. Inside were photos of Marcus with men she didn't recognize. Documents in Korean and English. Flight records, bank transfers. I had my people dig deeper, Jihoon said. Marcus isn't just obsessed with you. He's been hired. Someone paid him $50,000 2 months ago to get close to you, to get you to Seoul, to deliver you to a specific location. The room spun. What? Who? I don't know yet, but the transfer originated from an account connected to a politician here in Seoul. Someone wants you specifically, Grace. Marcus is just the weapon. She couldn't breathe. Why? I'm nobody. I'm just a maid. Your grandmother isn't nobody. She has something someone wants. Or she knows something. Or, Jihoon paused, his eyes sharpening. You have something she gave you without telling you what it was. Grace thought of her grandmother's insistence that she take a particular necklace before leaving Detroit. A simple gold chain with a small pendant. Lorraine had said it was for luck. Grace reached up now, felt it beneath her shirt. Jihoon noticed the gesture. May I see? She pulled it out. The pendant was small, circular, etched with symbols she'd never paid attention to. Jihoon stared at it like it was a live grenade. Where did your grandmother get this? I don't know. She's had it forever. This is a seal, Jihoon said quietly. A family seal. It belonged to the Park family, one of the oldest and most powerful lineages in Korea. This specific seal went missing in 1951. If your grandmother has it, it means she was given it for safekeeping. And if someone knows you have it now, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Grace understood. The seal was proof of something. Legitimacy, maybe. Inheritance, power. My grandmother never said anything about this, Grace whispered. She was protecting you, just like she's protecting it. But now that you're here, now that you're visible, Jihoon's jaw tightened. Someone decided it's time to take it back. That evening, Lorraine arrived at the penthouse, escorted by 2 of Jihoon's men. She moved slowly but deliberately, settling into a chair with a sigh. Grace knelt beside her, the necklace in her hand. Grandma, what is this? Lorraine looked at the seal, then at her granddaughter, then at Jihoon standing by the window. It's a promise kept, she said finally. In 1951, a woman came to our medical camp. She was dying. She had a son. She nodded at Jihoon. Him. She made me swear to keep this safe until the time was right. She said her family would come for it eventually. She said it proved her son was legitimate, that he had claim to something his father's other family wanted to erase. Jihoon's face was stone, but Grace saw his hands clench. You knew my mother. I held her hand when she died, Lorraine said softly. She told me about you, about the promise she'd made you make to survive. She said if you lived, you'd become powerful, and she wanted you to have proof that you weren't just some war orphan. You were Park Jin-woo's son. You had a name. The silence in the room was suffocating. Grace looked between them, trying to piece it together. Who is Park Jin-woo? A man who built an empire and died before claiming this son, Jihoon said, his voice empty of emotion. A man whose legitimate children have spent 50 years trying to erase any evidence that I exist. And now they know the seal exists, Lorraine said. They've known for years, but they didn't know where it was. Until Grace came to Seoul. Until I invoked the debt and brought attention to our family. This isn't your fault, Jihoon said to Lorraine. It's mine. I should have found the seal years ago. I should have. You should have lived your life, Lorraine interrupted, which is what you did. But now it's time to finish it. Grace stood, still holding the necklace. So what? We give it to them? We hand over proof that Jihoon has a claim to whatever empire his father built? No, Jihoon said. We use it. The Park family controls half the shipping in Korea. Legitimate business, but built on foundations that aren't. If I have proof of my legitimacy, I can challenge their control. But if I challenge them, they'll come for me with everything they have. They're already coming for you, Lorraine said. That's why they sent Marcus after Grace. They wanted the seal. They thought she'd be easy to take. Grace felt rage building in her chest. So I'm bait. I've been bait this whole time. You were meant to be, Ji-hoon said, but you're not. Not anymore. Because now I know what they want, and I'm going to make them regret showing their hand. For the next 3 days, Grace watched Ji-hoon work. He moved through the city like a storm, meeting with people in shadowed rooms, making calls in languages she didn't understand. His men brought him information, photos, documents, recordings. Slowly, a picture emerged. The current head of the Park family, Park Dae-jung, had orchestrated everything. He'd discovered through old military records that Lorraine had been present at his father's mistress's death. He'd traced Lorraine's family to Grace. He'd hired Marcus, knowing an obsessed ex would be the perfect cover for an abduction. The plan was simple. Grab Grace, threaten her to get the seal, then eliminate everyone who knew about it. But Ji-hoon was building a counterplan. And Grace, despite her fear, found herself in the middle of it. I need you to meet with Marcus, Ji-hoon said on the 4th night. Grace stared at him. Are you insane? I need him to think he's winning. I need him to lead us to his employer's intermediary. If we can connect Marcus directly to Park Dae-jung, we can expose the whole operation. And if something goes wrong, I'll be 10 feet away. My men will be everywhere. But Grace, he met her eyes. I won't force you. This is your choice. She thought of the 3 women Marcus had done this to before, the one who'd never been found. She thought of her grandmother, who'd risked everything to save a child in a war zone and had carried a secret for 50 years. She thought of what it meant to be brave when being brave might get you killed. I'll do it, she said. The meeting was set for a cafe in Itaewon, public enough to seem safe. Grace sat at a corner table, the necklace hidden beneath her shirt, her hands steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. When Marcus walked in, he looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome, charming, dangerous. Grace? He slid into the seat across from her, smiling like they were old friends. I'm glad you agreed to see me. I want this to stop, Marcus. Whatever you think is going to happen, it's not. Baby, I think you misunderstand the situation. I didn't come here for you. Well, not just for you. His eyes dropped to her necklace, now visible where she'd deliberately pulled it out. I came for that. Then take it. She pulled it off, held it out. Take it and leave. He reached for it, but his hand stopped inches away. Grace saw calculation flicker across his face. It's not that simple. My employer needs confirmation, needs to make sure it's real, needs to make sure there are no copies, no records, no witnesses. Witnesses like my grandmother. Like anyone who knows the story. Marcus leaned back, his smile fading. You don't get it, Grace. This isn't about a necklace. This is about erasing a problem that's existed for 50 years. Your grandmother made a mistake keeping that seal. Now I have to clean it up. Grace felt ice in her veins. You're going to kill us. I'm going to do my job. But hey, he shrugged. If you cooperate, maybe I can convince them to just make you disappear. New identity, new life. You'd be alive. Without my grandmother. She's old, baby. She had a good run. The rage that filled Grace was white-hot and crystalline. She leaned forward, her voice steady. You're not touching her. You're not touching me. And you're not getting the seal. Marcus's expression darkened. He reached across the table fast, but Grace was faster. She jerked back, and at that exact moment, the cafe's door opened and 6 men in suits walked in. Ji-hoon wasn't among them, but Grace recognized his security chief. Marcus saw them too. His hand dropped to his side, where she knew he carried a gun. You set me up. I gave you a choice, Grace said. You chose wrong. What happened next was fast and brutal. Marcus drew his weapon, but he never got a shot off. Ji-hoon's men moved like a single organism, disarming him, forcing him to the ground. Other patrons screamed and ran. Grace stayed in her seat, her heart hammering, watching as they dragged Marcus out the back exit. Ji-hoon appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. He confessed on recording, Ji-hoon said quietly. Everything he said about his employer, about eliminating witnesses. It's enough. Enough for what? To start a war. That night, Ji-hoon released the recording to carefully selected journalists and prosecutors. By morning, Park Dae-jung's name was splashed across every news outlet in Seoul. the legitimate businessman with ties to organized crime. The family patriarch willing to order murders to protect a 50-year-old secret. The man who'd hired foreign operatives to abduct and kill an American citizen on Korean soil. The scandal was nuclear. Park Dae-jung was arrested. His company's stock crashed. His family fractured as different factions tried to distance themselves. And through it all, Ji-hoon said nothing publicly. He didn't claim his legitimacy. He didn't demand his inheritance. He simply let the Park family destroy itself under the weight of its own corruption. Grace found him 3 days later on the roof of his building, watching the city lights spread out like a galaxy beneath him. She stood beside him, silent for a long moment. "You could have taken everything from them," she said. "You had proof. You had public sympathy. Why didn't you?" Ji-hoon's expression was unreadable. "Because my mother didn't give your grandmother that seal so I could take something from the Parks. She gave it to her so I would survive, so I would have proof of who I was if I ever needed it. But I built my empire without them. I don't need their legitimacy." "Then what was all this for?" "Justice," he said simply. "They tried to kill you to hide their shame. They needed to pay for that." Grace thought about that, about revenge and justice and the thin line between them, about her grandmother, still safe in the penthouse, who'd carried a secret for 5 decades just to give a dying woman peace, about Ji-hoon, who'd turned a blood debt into protection and transformed trauma into power. "What happens now?" she asked. "Marcus will be prosecuted here and then extradited. The 2 women he helped disappear, we found them. They're coming home. Park Dae-jung will spend the rest of his life in prison if the prosecutors do their job." Ji-hoon paused. "And you get to choose what comes next. You can go back to Detroit. You can stay here. You're free, Grace. The debt is paid." "Is it?" She looked at him, really looked at him. "My grandmother saved your life. You saved mine. Doesn't that just create a new debt?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite hope, but something vulnerable beneath the armor. "Is that how you see it? As debt?" "No," Grace said slowly. "I see it as connection, as the kind of bond that doesn't erase just because the threat is gone." Ji-hoon turned to face her fully. In the city lights, his features were softer, younger. "I've spent my life making sure no one could touch me, building walls so high that nothing could get through. And then your grandmother came back into my life and reminded me that some debts aren't transactions. They're promises. They're family," Grace finished. "Family," he agreed. "Something I haven't had since I was 12 years old." She reached out slowly and took his hand. He tensed, then relaxed, his fingers curling around hers. "My grandmother's not going back to Detroit anytime soon," Grace said. "She says Seoul suits her, says she has unfinished business here. Keeping me in line? Someone has to." Ji-hoon laughed, a real sound, rough and unpracticed but genuine. "I'm discovering that running an empire is easier than arguing with a woman who once saved my life. She has opinions about how I conduct business." "Good," Grace said. "You need someone who's not afraid of you. And you." His grip tightened slightly. "Are you afraid of me?" Grace thought about the question, about the violence she'd seen, the power he wielded, the darkness that surrounded everything he touched. She thought about the way he'd bowed to her grandmother, the way he'd protected her without hesitation, the way he'd chosen justice over revenge when he could have taken everything. "I'm cautious," she said honestly, "but not afraid. There's a difference." "And that's enough?" She smiled. "It's a start." 3 months later, Grace still worked in the building, but not as a maid. Ji-hoon had hired her officially as a liaison, someone who could bridge the cultural gaps in his increasingly international operations. Lorraine had taken over an entire floor, running what she called a community center, but what everyone else recognized as a hub for people who needed help navigating Seoul's underbelly safely. The blood debt had transformed into something stranger and more powerful, a found family built on old promises and new choices. On a Tuesday afternoon, Grace found Ji-hoon in his office, staring at the Park family seal that now sat in a glass case on his shelf. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "Regrets?" she asked. He shook his head. "I thought I'd want revenge more. I thought proving my legitimacy would matter. But watching them fall apart from the inside, and watching their corruption expose itself, that was more satisfying than taking their name ever could be. My grandmother would say that's growth." Your grandmother would be right. He turned to her. She usually is. It's infuriating. Grace laughed. You can tell her yourself. She's downstairs teaching someone how to negotiate with loan sharks. I think she's enjoying retirement more than she enjoyed working. She's terrifying, Jihoon said, but there was affection in his voice. I forgot what it was like to have someone who cares enough to tell me when I'm making a mistake. You have that now, Grace said. If you want it. He crossed the room to her, moving with that predatory grace that never quite left him, but his eyes were warm. I want it. I want. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I've built everything in my life through force and fear. I don't know how to build something that matters through anything else. You learn, Grace said softly. One day at a time. One choice at a time. You choose to be better than what was done to you. And if I fail, then you try again. That's what family does. Jihoon reached up, his hand hovering near her face, asking permission. She nodded. His palm cupped her cheek, warm and steady. I didn't think I'd have this, he said quietly. Any of this. I thought I'd die alone, powerful and empty. Your grandmother gave me a second chance at 12. You gave me another one at 50. 52, Grace corrected, smiling. 52, he amended, then softer. Thank you. She leaned into his touch. The debt's paid, remember? This is an obligation. It's choice. I know. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. That's what makes it real. Outside the window, Seoul stretched out in endless light, a city of millions, where an old blood debt had become a new beginning, where a black woman from Detroit and a Korean gangster with a tragic past had found something neither had been looking for. A place to belong. Not because they had to, because they chose to. The Park family never recovered. 3 of Park Dae-jung's children went to prison alongside him. The company was carved up and sold. The legitimate empire built on illegitimate foundations crumbled, and no one mourned it. Marcus Webb was extradited to the United States, where federal prosecutors added human trafficking charges to his roster. He'd die in prison. Grace felt nothing about that except relief. 6 months after that night on the roof, Lorraine passed away peacefully in her sleep. She'd made it to 87, lived to see her granddaughter safe and thriving, and died knowing the promise she'd kept for 50 years had transformed into something beautiful. At her funeral, Jihoon delivered the eulogy in English and Korean, his voice breaking only once when he called her the woman who taught me that survival isn't the same as living. Grace inherited her grandmother's necklace, the one she'd always worn, different from the Park family seal. Inside the simple gold pendant was a photograph of Lorraine as a young nurse and a small Korean boy with bandaged hands, both smiling at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, promises kept, debts paid, love remains. Grace wore it always, a reminder that some connections transcend blood and borders and time, that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can echo across decades, that the most powerful thing you can do is choose, every day, to be someone worth remembering. Jihoon never claimed the Park name. He kept the seal in his office, not as proof of legitimacy, but as a reminder that power means nothing without honor, that empires built on shame always fall, and that the greatest inheritance isn't money or title, it's the knowledge that someone believed you were worth saving. And Grace? Grace chose to stay in Seoul. She built her own kind of empire alongside Jihoon's, one focused on helping others navigate systems designed to break them. She turned her grandmother's community center into a force that rivaled any criminal organization, and because she understood what Jihoon had learned too late in life, real power isn't what you take, it's what you give. On the anniversary of Lorraine's death, Grace and Jihoon stood together at her grave, the one concession Jihoon had made to use his influence, bringing Lorraine's body back to be buried in Detroit beside the husband she'd lost decades before. They stood in silence, 2 people connected by an old debt that had become something neither could name, but both understood. She'd be proud of you, Jihoon said quietly, of what you've built. She'd be proud of both of us, Grace replied, but she'd also tell us we still have work to do. Jihoon smiled, that rare expression that only appeared when he thought of Lorraine. She'd probably have a list. I found one, Grace admitted, in her things. Projects she wanted to see happen. People she wanted us to help. She planned it all out before she died. Of course she did. Jihoon's smile widened. She never stopped being a general, did she? Never. Grace pulled out the folded paper, her grandmother's careful handwriting listing names, situations, connections. A roadmap for continuing her work. Question is, are we going to follow orders? Jihoon looked at the list, then at Grace, then back at the grave where a woman who'd saved his life rested beside the man she loved. He thought about the 12-year-old boy bleeding in a ditch, certain he was going to die. He thought about the nurse who'd risked everything to prove him wrong. He thought about promises kept and debts that became gifts and the strange and fierce love that could exist between people who chose to see each other as human. Every single one, he said. We follow every order on that list, and then we make our own list, and we keep going until there's no one left who needs saving. Grace took his hand, their fingers interlacing naturally now, a gesture that had become familiar over the months. That's a long game. Could take the rest of our lives. Good, Jihoon said. I have time, and I have you. What else do I need? They walked away from the grave together, two people bound by an old promise that had transformed into a new purpose. Behind them, the Detroit wind